Tonight's stories come from people who experience something they still think about years later. Most of them began as completely ordinary moments until something started feeling wrong. I have never used a sleeping aid again because of something that happened when I was a teenager. At the time, I lived alone with my mom. She was prescribed extremely strong sleeping medication, and I was dealing with insomnia myself. Sometimes I would go days without sleeping properly. I did not want prescription medication, so I started taking herbal sleep supplements instead. Mostly valerian root and a few other things that were supposed to help naturally. One night, I took my usual dose and went to bed. My bedroom had a strange layout back then. I had divided the room using a large shelving unit, so you had to walk around it to reach my bed. From above, the room almost looked like a U-shape. The door was at one end, and my bed was hidden around the corner at the other. After taking the supplements, I drifted off quickly. I do not know how much time passed before I woke up. At first, I was barely conscious. I remember hearing a voice somewhere in my room, but everything sounded muffled and distant. The supplements had left me heavily sedated, and I could not fully process what I was hearing. I slowly opened my eyes. My vision was blurry at first, but I could make out the shape of a tall man standing near the entrance to my room on the other side of the shelving unit. For a few seconds, my brain could not make sense of what I was seeing. Then adrenaline hit me all at once. I lived alone with my mother. There should not have been any man standing in my bedroom. I sat upright immediately. There is one detail that probably changed the outcome of that night. At the time, I was obsessed with knives and weapons. Looking back, I was probably a little unhinged about it. Next to my bed, I kept a machete. The second I grabbed it, the man turned around and ran. No hesitation. He bolted toward the front door. I jumped out of bed and chased after him, still half asleep and barely dressed, carrying a machete through the apartment like a horror movie character. But by the time I reached the front entrance, he was already gone. That was when I noticed the front door. He had kicked it completely off its hinges. The entire door frame was damaged. And somehow, I had slept through all of it. The realization made me feel sick. For a moment, I almost ran outside after him. Then I remembered my mother. Her bedroom was directly beside the front entrance. I ran into her room expecting the worst, but she was still asleep, completely unconscious from her medication. I woke her up while calling 911. The police arrived eventually, but there was very little they could do. The intruder was already gone, and aside from the destroyed front door, there was not much evidence left behind. I remember asking the officers what we were supposed to do for the rest of the night without a front door. They told me the intruder had probably been frightened off badly enough that he would not come back. After they left, my mother went back to bed. I stayed awake on the couch until sunrise with the machete beside me. And as I sat there thinking about everything that happened, certain details started bothering me more and more. The intruder had ignored every other room in the apartment. Every door had been left untouched except mine. He kicked down the front door and walked directly to my bedroom. I also could not stop thinking about the voice that woke me up. What had he been saying before I fully regained consciousness? Was he trying to wake me up? Talking to himself? Looking for someone else? Or had he entered that apartment specifically for me? That thought still bothers me, because if I had not woken up at that exact moment, I do not know what would have happened. Since then, I have never been able to sleep deeply again. And whenever I move somewhere new, I still keep some kind of weapon near my bed. Not because I am paranoid. Because once you wake up and find a stranger standing in your room, you never really lose that fear. Some people only realize how close they came to danger years later. This happened in Ohio sometime during the 1980s. Back then, I was a teenager living with my parents outside Columbus. This was long before cell phones, security cameras, or any of the things people rely on now. I do not know when the man first noticed me. But I remember the first time I saw him. It was late at night, and I had gone into the kitchen to get a glass of water. The kitchen lights were off, and our house had one of those greenhouse-style windows that pushed outward slightly. As I walked toward the sink, I happened to glance outside. There was a man standing directly beyond the glass. I remember freezing instantly. He was just standing there in the darkness, staring inside. I did not scream. I did not wake my parents. I quietly backed away and returned to my bedroom, pretending nothing had happened. Looking back, that probably sounds insane. But the truth is, by that point, I already knew someone had been outside my window for weeks. Our house backed up against a park, and because it was a one-story home, anyone could walk behind the property from the main road without attracting attention. At first, it was just a feeling. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the overwhelming sense that someone was watching me. It happened over and over again. Because it was summer, my bedroom window stayed open at night with only the blinds and screen between me and the outside. Then eventually I started hearing it, fingernails dragging slowly across the window screen, not scratching aggressively, just lightly running across the mesh. Every time I heard it, I completely froze. Sometimes I worked up the courage to run into my parents' room, but by the time they checked outside, nobody was there. After a while, they stopped taking it seriously. But it kept happening, 2 or 3 nights a week, sometimes more. Honestly, when I finally saw him outside the kitchen window, part of me actually felt relieved, because it meant I was not imagining any of it. Months passed like this. Then winter arrived. One morning there were footprints in the snow directly beneath my bedroom window. That was finally enough for my parents to admit someone really had been there. Still, nothing really changed. I think people viewed things differently back then. Then one night, everything escalated. My parents were out at dinner, and I was home alone with a couple of friends while we got ready to go out. At some point, one of us opened the blinds in the bedroom. I turned around, and there he was, standing directly outside the window, staring at us. This time, I saw him clearly. He had bright orange-dyed hair and a face I still remember vividly. The second we saw him, all of us screamed. We ran into the bathroom because it was the only room in the house without windows. I remember sitting there terrified before finally forcing myself to run to the kitchen phone and call 911. The police arrived around the same time my parents got home. But by then, the man was gone. I still remember how dismissive the officers were. They acted like my friends and I were just drunk teenagers making the story up. A few weeks later, I was walking past a newspaper stand when I suddenly stopped. There was a picture of the man on the front page, the same orange hair, the same face. According to the article, he had attacked 2 girls at a gas station and killed them. When police tried to detain him, they ended up shooting him. I do not remember all the details anymore. It happened a long time ago. But I still remember the feeling I had looking at that newspaper: shock, relief, and the realization that for months a dangerous man had been standing outside my bedroom window while I slept. The next story happened somewhere people were never supposed to be. When I was 15, one of my favorite places to hike was the Natchez Trace. For anyone unfamiliar with it, the Natchez Trace is an old historic road that stretches through multiple southern states. Parts of it date back hundreds of years. It was used by Native American tribes, traders, and even soldiers during the Civil War. Today, most of it is federally protected land, and, honestly, parts of it feel isolated in a way that is difficult to describe unless you have been there yourself. There are no streetlights, no buildings nearby, just miles of forest, old trails, burial mounds, and stretches of road that seem to disappear into the trees. People in my town loved hiking out there, but there were also stories, warnings about not staying too late after dark, stories about people disappearing or strange things being found deep in the woods. Most of us treated those stories like urban legends. At the time, one of my friends and I used to hike there constantly. We would usually go off trail because you could find all kinds of strange things hidden in the woods. Old foundations, abandoned campsites, Civil War remnants, that sort of thing. One evening in the spring, we stayed out later than usual. It was not fully dark yet, but the sun was already beginning to set. We had been hiking for a couple of hours when we pushed through a break in the trees and suddenly stepped into a large open clearing. That was when we saw the truck. Even before we noticed the men, the truck itself immediately felt wrong. Vehicles were not supposed to be out there at all. Then we saw the two men standing beside it. They both had shovels, and there was a massive pile of fresh dirt beside them. It looked like they had been digging for a long time. I remember seeing the open bed of the truck, but not being able to tell what was inside it. For a few seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The men just stared at us. Then everything happened at once. Both of them jumped into the truck and started driving directly toward us at full speed. We ran immediately. I remember hearing the truck tearing across the field behind us while we sprinted for the trees. At the time, I genuinely thought they were trying to run us over. The second we reached the woods, we just kept running blindly through the trees. Behind us, we heard the truck stop, then doors slamming, then shouting. At some point, I also started hearing dogs barking somewhere behind us. That was the moment pure panic really hit me. We kept running until we found a massive deadfall where several broken trees had collapsed together. We crawled underneath it and stayed completely still. I remember trying so hard not to breathe loudly. The woods had gone almost completely dark by then. Somewhere in the distance, we could still hear the men yelling. Then one of them shouted something that I still remember perfectly. "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." Hearing that terrified me more than anything else. For a while, all we could hear were distant voices, barking dogs, and branches snapping somewhere in the woods. Then eventually, silence. A few minutes later, we heard the truck engine start again somewhere farther away. Even after the sound faded, we stayed hidden for a long time before finally crawling out. Neither of us spoke while walking back to the car. And during the entire drive home, every pair of headlights we saw made me think they had followed us. To this day, I still have no idea what those men were doing out there. When I was younger, my mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. A body, a grave, something like that. Now that I am older, I honestly think it was more likely drugs, money, or some kind of hidden stash. But honestly, I do not think I want to know the real answer. The part that still unsettles me most is the fact that I grew up in a very small town, which means there is a decent chance I have seen those men again over the years without realizing it. Standing in line at a grocery store, sitting at a red light, passing them somewhere in public, and every time I think about that possibility, it still gives me chills. At first, the next story sounded completely harmless. This happened when I was around 14 years old. At the time, I was trying to make some money by selling old toys online. I had a large Lego Harry Potter collection that I did not care about anymore, so I listed it on Facebook Marketplace. A few days later, someone contacted me about buying it. I remember being excited because it felt like the first time I was making my own money. The buyer was an older man, at least according to his profile picture. He told me he wanted to buy the Legos for his grandson. At first, the conversation seemed normal, but after a while, certain things started feeling strange. Whenever I asked him questions about meeting up, he would either ignore the messages completely or respond hours later. Sometimes I had to send multiple messages just to get an answer. His messages also seemed oddly written. The grammar did not sound like an older adult. It sounded more like someone pretending to be one. At the time, I noticed it, but I ignored it. Eventually, we agreed to meet at a bookstore about 10 minutes away from my house. I deliberately chose that location because I did not want to give a stranger my home address. The man wanted to meet at 8:30 at night. Looking back, that alone should have been enough to cancel the entire thing. But at 14, I was mostly focused on the money. Still, something about the situation bothered me enough that I asked my mom to come with me. My dad was away on a business trip at the time, so it was just the two of us. My mom immediately asked if I could reschedule the meeting for daytime instead. I told her the man seemed harmless. Eventually, she agreed to come anyway. When we arrived, my mom parked several minutes away because she did not want the man seeing our car. We walked the rest of the way to the bookstore. I had the Lego pieces stuffed inside my jacket pocket so they would not be visible. As soon as we got close to the store, I noticed a man standing outside near the entrance. Immediately, something felt wrong. He looked nothing like the person from the Facebook profile picture. The profile picture showed a man with long gray hair. But the person standing outside had a buzz cut, a thin build, and a sling bag across his chest. Before we crossed the street, my mom quietly stopped me. She told me to message the buyer and say I was already inside the bookstore. She said she had a bad feeling and did not want me approaching him, so I sent the message while we walked past him. I tried to keep my phone hidden so he would not notice what I was doing. I told him, "I'm already inside the bookstore. Can you come in?" Almost immediately, he replied, "Come outside." I told him I was staying inside. He insisted again, "Come outside." By then it was fully dark out. The area was nearly empty except for a few passing cars and the streetlight in front of the store. Even though my mom and I were already walking away toward the car, I kept messaging him so he would think I was still inside the bookstore. Then he sent one final message, "You idiot," followed by a laughing emoji. That message genuinely scared me. Something about it felt wrong. It felt like he knew exactly what we were doing. The second we got back to the car, my mom told me to block him immediately and delete my Marketplace account. When we got home, she hugged me and told me never to meet strangers that late at night again. But the strangest part happened later. Around that same time, one of my friends was also selling Lego figures online. He was a little older than me, maybe 16. I told him about the situation, but before I even finished explaining it, he interrupted me. He suddenly said, "Wait, was it this guy?" Then he showed me screenshots from his own Facebook Marketplace messages. It was the same man, same profile, same story about buying Legos for his grandson. My friend had gotten uncomfortable too and stopped responding before meeting him. Neither of us ever heard from the man again after that. I still do not know who he really was, but I have a feeling he was never trying to buy Legos for his grandson at all. The final story tonight happened when a child trusted the wrong stranger. This happened when I was around 10 years old. Every few years, my family would visit my mom's hometown during the summer. It was an extremely small rural town surrounded by forest. The population was only a couple hundred people, and everyone seemed to know each other. My mom, stepdad, little sister, and I were staying with family friends during the trip. Not long after we arrived, my mom handed me $5 and told me to walk the dog to the convenience store so I could buy a drink or a snack. I was thrilled. The store was only about a 5-minute walk away, and because the town was so small, walking around alone did not seem unusual at the time. After buying a Pepsi, I sat outside the store in the shade for a few minutes before heading back. That was when a blue car pulled into the parking lot. The driver rolled down the window and waved at me. She looked to be somewhere in her 50s, maybe older. Her hair was messy, her clothes looked dirty, and the car itself was covered in rust with cracked windows. I smiled politely and looked back down at my drink. Then she called out, "Hey there, what's your name?" I hesitated for a second before answering. "Kayla." At first, none of it seemed especially strange. People in small towns tended to be friendly. Then she said, "Well, Kayla, I've got some makeup here. I think you'd look beautiful in it. Do you want to come try it on?" That was the first moment alarm bells started going off in my head. I told her no. I was 10 years old, awkward, and not remotely interested in makeup. But she kept insisting. Then she changed tactics. "Well, what about a muffin? I've got fresh muffins in the back seat. You can come grab one." At that point, every stranger danger lesson I had ever heard suddenly came rushing back into my mind. Do not take food from strangers. Do not get into a stranger's car. I told her my family was waiting for me and started walking away. That was when her tone changed completely. She sounded irritated now. "Well, I can drive you back," she snapped. "But you need to get in the car." I remember feeling genuinely scared for the first time. I picked up my dog and started hurrying away without saying another word. In my panic, I even left my Pepsi sitting outside the store. For some reason, I decided not to walk directly back to the house where my family was staying. Something in my gut told me not to let this woman know where I was going. Instead, I headed toward a nearby campsite a few minutes away. I figured there would be other people around. I was wrong. The campground was nearly empty that day, and when I glanced behind me, my stomach dropped. The blue car was following me. She stayed several car lengths behind, moving slowly enough to match my pace exactly. I panicked and started walking faster while carrying my dog. Eventually, I spotted a man setting up a campsite. I ran over to him nearly crying and tried explaining what was happening. I told him a woman had tried to lure me into her car and was now following me. He barely reacted. He just shrugged and said, "Sorry, I can't leave my dog alone." Then he went back to what he was doing. I remember begging him one more time before realizing he was not going to help me. When I looked back again, the blue car was gone. At first, I thought she had finally left, so I took the opportunity to run deeper into the campground, searching for another way back. That was when I noticed a thick area of bushes near the road. I crawled inside with my dog and stayed completely still. A few minutes later, the blue car slowly drove past again. She was searching for me. I remember watching through the bushes while trying not to make a sound. Then the car looped around again, and again, and again. At one point, she finally parked farther down the road and got out of the car entirely. I watched her walking slowly along the roadside, looking around while I hid there, completely frozen. I genuinely thought she was going to find me. Eventually, I heard her curse angrily before walking back to her car. She slammed her hand against the hood, got back inside, and sped away. Even after she disappeared, I stayed hidden for another 30 minutes because I was too afraid to move. When I finally made it back to the house, my legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand. My mom initially scolded me for being gone so long. Then I burst into tears and explained everything that had happened. At first, she did not believe me. She just said, "Nobody around here would do something like that." But one of our family friends overheard the conversation and quietly pulled me aside. He asked me to describe the woman and the car. After listening for a while, he admitted he had never seen anyone matching that description in town before. Later that evening, I noticed him pulling my mom aside to talk privately. I never heard what he said to her. But after that night, I was never allowed to go anywhere alone for the rest of the trip. And honestly, I still do not know what that woman wanted from me, but I do not think she was simply trying to give a 10-year-old girl makeup and muffins. Some stories disappear after a few days. Others stay with people for the rest of their lives. Good night.